When my sister was little, maybe 3 years old, she had what everyone assumed was an imaginary friend. She'd sit in our room talking and laughing like someone was there. When my mom asked her who she was talking to, she'd say it was an older lady named E. She insisted E was nice, that she told her stories and played with her dolls. My mom brushed it off. Kids do that sort of thing. But my sister was consistent. She always called her E, always described her the same way. This went on until she was about 4. Then it just stopped. No more talking to E, no more games. She never brought her up again, and everyone figured she had grown out of it. Fast forward to when my sister was 10. My mom got a call one night that our grandpa was in bad shape at the nursing home. She and my dad rushed out the door. It was just me and my sister home alone. She was in our room. I was at the far end of the house when I heard our little radio click on. The volume turned all the way up, then all the way down, then off. Then it did it again 3 times in a row. I walked to our room ready to yell at her for blasting the thing, but she wasn't touching it. She was just sitting there, pale as a sheet staring at it. I went over to unplug the radio, but there was no plug. I checked for batteries. Nothing. The thing shouldn't have been able to turn on at all. It was the only radio in the house. I looked at her. She whispered to me that it was E. That's when I called my mom while completely freaked out. She sounded shaken when I told her what happened. Then she told me Grandpa had just passed away minutes earlier. We didn't talk much about it after that. My mom didn't like bringing it up, but my sister stayed quiet and uneasy for days. A few nights later, she woke me up, saying she felt like someone was sitting at the end of her bed. I told her she'd been dreaming, but she swore she felt the mattress dip under the weight. At the funeral a few days later, a relative came over with an old photo she had found while going through boxes. She handed it to my mom, saying she thought we should have it. It was a wedding picture of my grandparents. My sister looked at it and immediately said, "That's E." She pointed right to my grandmother. None of us had seen a picture of her before. She had died when my mom was only 11, and after that my step-grandmother moved into the house and cleared away every photo of her. We had no images of her anywhere. My sister couldn't have known what she looked like, and yet she recognized her instantly. That shook all of us. My mom got upset and had to leave the room for a while. My sister didn't understand why everyone was staring at her, but she just kept saying, "That's E. That's who I played with." After the funeral, the house felt different. My sister wouldn't go to bed without a light on for months. Sometimes she'd wake up in the middle of the night and say she heard someone humming in the kitchen. Once I heard it too, faint, like an old tune drifting through the house. We grew up in that house, the same one my mom had grown up in. My sister and I shared that room for years. I never saw E myself, but I believed her after the radio. That moment was too clear to explain away. A dead radio clicking on and changing volume 3 times, right as our grandfather passed, and my sister saying it was her friend. It's hard to ignore something like that. Even now as adults, we still talk about it sometimes. My sister says she never saw E again after that night, but she still dreams of her every now and then. Always the same image, an older woman with kind eyes, sitting in the corner of the room like she's keeping watch. I spent a lot of weekends at my grandparents' house growing up. It's an old place, creaky floors, narrow stairs, and rooms that always felt too quiet at night. I've always been afraid of the upstairs, even as a kid. The worst room is a long, narrow bedroom with closets on both sides of the doorway, a bed in the middle, and a single window at the far end. My grandparents once told me the previous owner's kids swore they saw a gorilla come out of one closet, dance around, and slip back in. At the time, it sounded silly. As I got older, it didn't feel so funny anymore. When I was 14, my grandparents started sleeping in separate rooms downstairs. That meant I had to move into a different room on the first floor, the one directly under that upstairs bedroom. The first night I slept there, I was lying awake when I heard it. Heavy, slow steps. They started at one end of the upstairs room, crossed above me, and stopped near the window. I froze. Old houses make noise, but these weren't random creaks. They were footsteps, steady and casual. After a minute, I got up and went to my grandpa's room. I whispered what I heard. He told me the house was old and it creaks. He wasn't mean about it. He just wanted me to sleep. He got up, walked with me to the dining room, flipped on the light, and said to leave it on if it helped. It did help a little. I could see the light bleeding under my door and into my room. It made the dark feel less full. I went back to bed, but it started again. This time from the window side, moving back toward the door. Same slow pace directly above me. Then I heard the stairs. 10 distinct steps with a pause on the landing. Something had come down onto my floor. I stared at the doorway, where the light from the dining room spilled across the hall carpet. Nothing showed up, but I felt like something was standing just out of sight. Then came a new sound, scratching. I knew where it was coming from. My grandpa keeps a wooden gun case against the wall, and the sound was right there. Long drags against wood coming from my grandpa's gun case in the corner. I could hear the cabinet door tapping slightly with each scrape. I tried to scream, and nothing came out. Finally, I forced out a yell, and my grandpa came running. By then, the sound had stopped. He checked the hall. He checked the front door. He checked the lock on the gun case. He told me again it was just the old house. Then he told me to try to sleep. He left the door open and the lights on, and I did what I had to do. I dragged a sheet down the side of the bed and made myself a little cave under it. I wrapped myself in a comforter, put on headphones, turned my back to the door, and stared at the wall. If there were footsteps again, I didn't hear them. The headphones did their job. In the morning, my grandpa told my grandma I'd had a rough night. She laughed and said I wasn't the first. My cousin had woken her up on her last visit, saying she heard footsteps upstairs at night. Hearing that should have made me feel better. It didn't. It made the pattern feel more real. Since then, every time I've stayed there, I hear the same pattern. Steps pacing back and forth in that upstairs room. They always start near the closets, cross to the window, then back to the door. I've never heard them come down the stairs again like that first night, and I hope I never do. But the pacing never stops. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, already counting the footsteps in my head before I even realize I'm hearing them. There have been smaller moments too. Once I woke up shivering even though the blankets were heavy. Only my face was cold, like someone was standing right over me. Another time my phone slid off the nightstand. I reached down and found it standing upright on its edge. My cousin told me her story when she came home from college. She spent a summer in that room. One night she got up to use the bathroom around 2. The bathroom is next to the stairwell. She said, as she passed the bottom step, she heard weight settle on a tread. That soft wooden warning you only hear when someone is standing still. She locked the bathroom door and sat on the closed toilet listening. Nothing moved. When she came back out, she said the house felt crowded, even though everyone was asleep. My grandparents explain this way. My grandpa says the house is old and shifts with the weather. My grandma tells stories about the past owners, sometimes joking, sometimes not. But none of that explains the rhythm of those steps, the exact same path every time. Closet to window, window to door, back and forth, over and over. I'm 23 now, and I still won't go upstairs alone. I run up to grab something during the day and get back down as fast as I can. At night when I stay over, I sleep on the bed again, but with headphones in, always with my back to the door. I've gotten used to it in a way. But every time I hear those steps start up again, the fear feels just as sharp as it did that first night. I tell myself it's fine, that it's just noise. But deep down, I know better. If it ever decides to come down the stairs again, I don't think I want to be awake to find out what happens next. Back when I was in high school, one of my closest friends lived right next door to this house that nobody seemed to want. It was always up for sale. A family would move in, and a few months later, they'd be gone. Sometimes people left so fast it looked like they'd packed overnight. For at least 2 years, the place never had the same owner for more than 6 months. Everyone in the neighborhood noticed, but nobody talked much about why. One night, my friend and I were hanging out, bored out of our minds when he brought it up. He said we should finally go check the place out since it had been sitting empty again for a while. It was late, the streets were quiet, and it felt like a night where you do something dumb just to have a story. We went around back and found a dog door. He was small enough to squeeze through, and once he was inside, he unlatched the back door for me. We stepped in and shut it behind us. At first glance, the house was ordinary. A craftsman-style place probably built in the 1950s, same style as most of the homes in that older neighborhood. My friend's house had nearly the same layout. The walls were bare. The carpet had that musty smell of a place that's been closed up for too long, and the air felt heavier than outside, like the rooms hadn't been aired out in months. The kitchen stood out the most. There was this built-in breakfast nook pushed up against a wide picture window. Even with the power off, the glow from the streetlight outside cut through the glass and gave the room a faint yellow tint. We sat down on the floor, facing the table, talking quietly. I can't explain why we lingered there. Maybe it was just the thrill of being in a place we weren't supposed to be. Then everything went wrong. My friend suddenly let out a sharp scream. At that exact second, my world went black. It wasn't like closing your eyes. It was deeper, as if someone had dropped a curtain over me. And with it came this rush of cold that wrapped around me from head to toe. I felt smothered in it. I started yelling, completely disoriented, and that's when I felt my friend grab my arm. He yanked me hard, dragging me through the dark I couldn't see through. Slowly, my vision returned, and with it came the warmth of regular air. I realized we were outside again, standing under the harsh white glow of the streetlight. My lungs burned like I'd been holding my breath. The strange thing was, it was December, and yes, the night outside was cold, but inside that house should have been warmer. What I felt in there was far worse. It was a cold that clung to me. I looked at my friend. He was pale, wide-eyed, and shaking. I demanded to know what he saw. He told me that while I was talking, something crawled out from under the table. He described it as a black figure, shaped loosely like a girl, though there were no features, just a solid shifting mass of darkness. It crawled out and sat on me. He said my eyes were wide open, but I was flailing like I couldn't see. That's when he panicked and dragged me out. We stood there on the sidewalk, trying to process what just happened. I couldn't make sense of it, but I knew what I had felt. The cold wasn't natural. It was physical, pressing down on me, almost sticky like the darkness itself had weight. Even breathing felt wrong in that moment. For days afterward, I couldn't shake it. I'd replay the moment over and over. Walking past the house was impossible. I'd cross the street or take the long way around just to avoid it. Even when I tried to forget, I'd get flashes of that suffocating cold at random times, like a memory my body couldn't let go of. My friend and I are still close, and every now and then the story comes up. His description of that thing never changes. He swears he saw it crawl out from under the table, like it had been waiting for us. I've never seen him look so afraid as he did that night, and I've never felt anything like that blackness again. That house stood in Bakersfield, near Garces High. From the outside, it looked like any other mid-century home on the block. But for whatever reason, nobody stayed there. Families came and went. People left in the night. And after what happened to us, I understood why. I don't know what that figure was, or why it singled me out. All I know is that in that kitchen, for those few seconds, I felt something take away my sight and smother me in darkness. And even though I walked out of that house, a part of me feels like something in there didn't let go. About a month ago, I went over to my girlfriend's house like I usually did. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I walked into the living room. Right away, I felt off, and I couldn't settle into the room the way I normally did. Then I realized what had changed. They'd moved in one of her grandmother's old pieces of furniture, a china cabinet. Her grandmother had passed away a few months before. I never met her. She'd been bedridden in the hospital for a long time. But standing there in front of her cabinet, I felt uneasy. More than uneasy, actually. Anxious in a way I couldn't shake. Being near it made me feel sad, almost like grief was clinging to the wood. When I mentioned it to my girlfriend, she just brushed it off. "It's nothing," she said, and went to the bathroom. I stayed behind, staring at the thing. It stood about 6 feet tall, made of dark polished wood. The sides were paneled, but the front was glass, so you could see everything inside. And at the back of the shelves, a mirror ran the length of it. Inside were her grandmother's things, dainty teacups, little porcelain baby dolls, knickknacks carefully lined up. I leaned closer, looking at the dolls. That's when I noticed something. In the mirror at the back of the cabinet, there was a shape, a dark outline, the silhouette of someone standing just behind me. I spun around. Nothing. My chest tightened. I called out for my girlfriend, but before I could say another word, a high-pitched scream came from the bathroom. I bolted over and pounded on the door, shouting her name. The door creaked open, and she was sitting on the floor, sobbing. She told me she'd just seen someone in the bathroom mirror. That was enough for both of us. We didn't grab shoes, jackets, or anything. We just ran straight out the front door, down the steps, and into my car. I drove without even thinking, hands gripping the wheel like a vice. We didn't have a destination. We just needed to get away. We drove for nearly an hour before either of us spoke. Every mile I felt like I was peeling off that uneasiness, but neither of us could shake what we'd seen. When I finally brought her back home later that night, her mom was sitting on the doorstep waiting. She looked rattled. Before we even said a word, she told us she'd been seeing shadows moving through the house. That sealed it for me. I've always been the type to chase this stuff down. If someone says their house is haunted, I'll volunteer to stay the night. If a friend mentions seeing something strange in the woods, I'll be the first one to go looking. 9 times out of 10, nothing ever happens. I don't spook. But this was different. This wasn't just stories or shadows in the corner of your eye. This was the two of us seeing things at the exact same time in 2 different mirrors. The china cabinet in the living room, the mirror in the bathroom, and her mom, completely separate from us, noticing shadows moving that same night. The feeling I had standing in front of that cabinet hasn't left me. That heavy sadness, like the air itself carried someone else's grief, has stayed in my chest. The memory of that silhouette in the glass is burned into me. Even now, I can picture the dolls lined up neatly on the shelves, porcelain eyes staring forward, while a darker shape stood behind mine in the reflection. I can't explain what happened that night. I just know I've never felt a house push me out like that before, and I don't think I'll ever set foot in that living room again.